Hello, and welcome to day 21 of Business English 2. Let's start off today with a little quiz, a little check on grammar and sentence structure. So here are some text messages between a couple of people. Take a moment and study this and see if you can find the mistake, or if you can understand the mistake that is being pointed out. So again, if you want to stop the video for a moment so you can study it, go ahead and do that, and then we will continue. Okay, now that you've had a chance to look at it, let us look at it together. So this says, dude, me and Nick are about to go to a Giants game. Box seats, want to go? Nick and I. What? It's Nick and I. Me and Nick is not proper grammar, dude. You are right. It is Nick and I, because you are no longer invited. So what's going on here? Well, the first message says, dude. What does dude mean? Dude is generally a guy or a man or even a boy. It's just sort of an informal way of addressing somebody. It can be used for a stranger, like, dude, look out! Or, dude, what are you doing? If somebody's in your way or blocking you or runs into you or something, you can even just use it all by itself. It's like, dude, or like, dude, get away. Okay, so it can be used for a stranger. It's also used among friends, good friends usually, to speak to each other in an informal, friendly way, and it's not rude in that way. Just like, what's up, dude? How you doing? So you'll hear that a lot of times. People say, like, what's up? What's up, dude? What's up is what's going on, what's happening, what are you doing? Okay, well, what's up, dude? What's going on? Okay, so it's a friendly greeting. Dude, me and Nick are about to go to a Giants game. Box seats. Want to go? So, first of all, what's a Giants game? And then what are box seats? I'm not sure, actually, in this case, because there's a couple of choices. If it's a baseball game, then it could be the San Francisco Giants. SF here, kind of overlapped the logo here. SF Giants, that's the San Francisco Giants, which you can see is for baseball. Or it could be the New York Giants, which is football, American football, not soccer. Okay? So which one is it? There's no way to tell from this conversation. It would just depend on the context or where they are, probably. If they're on the East Coast, then it would be the New York Giants. If they're on the West Coast, then it would be the San Francisco Giants. And it would also depend on what time of year it is, because baseball is played in the summer, spring and summer, and football is played in the fall and winter. So it would depend on that. So what are box seats? Well, if you have a stadium, you have the regular seating here. The box seats, that would be these seats up here. They're actually enclosed in boxes. They have like a glass front. They're higher up, but they're more comfortable. They're better seats. They're in the winter, they would be heated, and in the summer, they would be air conditioned, where, of course, these seats are not. So if it's cold and snowing, you're freezing. And if it's a hot, sunny day, you may be burning up and sunburned. So these are more comfortable, even though you're farther away from the field. And inside, some of these are really nice. They have the seats here, and a lot of times they have sort of an area with televisions. They may have a bar. You could get food. So it's a more comfortable place to sit and relax. And usually these are owned by, of course, the team owners, and a lot of companies, corporate people will have a box seat at a stadium to watch the home games for that city. And a lot of the new stadiums that are built have a lot of these box seats because they can make a lot of money by selling them to companies, because then companies will bring clients there to try to impress them, to treat them to a football game or a baseball game, and food and drinks. So it's a nice way to entertain clients if you're trying to negotiate or get a new contract or something like that. So these box seats are huge money makers for the teams, for the stadiums. Okay, so dude, me and Nick are about to go to a Giants game. Box seats. Want to go? This is actually two sentences, so that should actually say more like box seats, which isn't actually a sentence, but it's a separate phrase. And then wanna go. What does wanna mean? Wanna is an informal contraction for want to go, which means do you want to go? And the do you is sort of understood. We don't have to write it. It's like if we say something like close the door. We're actually saying you close the door. It's more of a command. This is a question. Do you want to go? Want to go? And then his friend says, Nick and I. What? What are you talking about? It's Nick and I. So he's saying that it should say Nick and I are about to go to a Giants game. Because here, Nick and I, that's the subject. So Nick and I. How do you know if it's me or I? Remove the other one. So would you say, me am about to go to a Giants game? No, you wouldn't say me am. You'd say, I am about to go. So, I and Nick, or usually we would reverse it, put the other person first, Nick and I. And of course it's plural, two people, so instead of am, it's are. So Nick and I are about to go to a Giants game. So he says, it's Nick and I. Me and Nick is not proper grammar, dude. So his friend writes back, you're right. It is Nick and I. Because you are no longer invited. So, because he corrected the grammar here, his friend got offended and said, you're not invited anymore. I'm inviting you to a game, box seats. These tickets are certainly expensive. Good seats. It'll be a lot of fun. We can relax and talk, enjoy the game. So he's offering him something very nice, and then this guy just corrects his grammar. So he gets offended and says, never mind, you're not invited anymore. So, is proper grammar important? Yes, absolutely. But in certain cases, certain situations, you don't want to offend people, you don't want to upset people. So with family and friends, there are times when you might correct something, depending on the situation and your age and different things like that. But in general, among friends, in text messages, it's not so important. It is, but it's not worth ruining a friendship. Now, in business writing, on a job application, a cover letter, a letter to customers or clients, in advertising, is grammar important? Absolutely. Extremely important. But with friends, more informal situations, sometimes you need to just let the mistake go and not worry about it so that you don't offend somebody. Now, obviously, in class, I will try to correct you because that's how you learn and that's how you improve. So forgive me. Forgive me for correcting you or on cacao when I correct you, because that's my job. And that's hopefully what you are here for, is to learn and improve. Okay, so just a reminder, your journals are actually due next week. Next Thursday, June 4th. Okay? Remember, you should have a total of 10 entries. You've already done 5. Now you should have a total of 10. The first 5, you had these specific topics on, these specific subjects. The last 5, it's open topic. You can write about anything you want. Okay? The important thing here is I want you to write it. Copy and paste from Wikipedia or a newspaper or a Naver blog. That's not writing. Anybody can copy and paste. Okay? So it should be something that you write yourself. And when you do that, try to use the things that we've been studying in class. Try to use subject-verb agreement. Try to use good sentence structure. Try to use proper capitalization. Okay? Try to use those things so that your writing actually does get better. So think about what you're writing and how you're doing it, and put some effort into it, take some time, and do the best you can. Again, will you make some mistakes? Probably, and that's okay. The idea is to practice and try to improve and to try to get better. Okay, today we're going to be talking about sentence structure, and the reason for doing that is to help you avoid and fix some common errors. In sentence structure, there are a lot of common errors, common mistakes that people make, even native speakers. There are some common mistakes that people make that make them sound uneducated or unprofessional. And so the reason we're studying this is to help you recognize those things so that you can avoid them and fix them. You can correct them. So hopefully you won't make them, but if you do, or if you see them somewhere else, you can correct the errors. Okay, so the question I asked you on Cacao this morning was, what is a sentence? And I've gotten several different answers, and some of them are very, very close, but most of them are missing something, are missing part of the definition. So let's start with this. What is a sentence? Well, before we can actually define a sentence, we need to look at clauses. So first of all, what is a clause? A clause is simply a group of words with a subject and a verb. And sometimes we'll write S plus V, subject plus verb. So that's a clause. Is that a sentence? Maybe, maybe not. Now, clause is also a good homonym. There are some other words that are pronounced exactly the same. Remember homonyms? Words that have the same pronunciation. So a clause, it may or may not express a complete thought, and therefore may or may not form a complete sentence. And so we'll be looking at some different types of clauses. Before that, what kind of clause is this? Who is the big man in the red suit here? Obviously, this is a Christmas picture. Who is this man? That is Santa Claus. Notice Claus here is spelled differently. There's no E at the end. And it's his name, Santa Claus, so the C here must be capitalized. So we have clause, a group of words with a subject and a verb. Santa Claus. Now if we look at Santa Claus's picture here, who is this on the left? We've talked about this character before with the red nose, not a green nose, but a red nose. Remember, that is Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer. Remember, rain here is spelled R-E-I-N. Okay? Like the reins on a horse. You pull back on the reins. Okay? Also, if you want to rein in spending, you try to bring it under control to reduce it. Don't confuse that with reign, like a king or queen reigns over their kingdom. Or, of course, rain, like water falling from the sky. All of those are homonyms. So that's Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer. And we also have claws. That's the sharp, not just fingernails, but the sharp pointed claws on the bare paws. Okay, so we talked before about werewolves, and werewolves will get very sharp teeth, they'll grow fur, and they'll grow very sharp claws on their hands and feet. Okay, so here the bear's claws are on its feet, or we'd say paws, like dogs and cats have paws. Don't confuse that with pause, like to stop for a moment, to take a short break. Alright, so we have lots of homonyms here. So, to review these, we have big claws. This is a Santa Claus, but he's got a very big belly, so he's a big claws. Here, this man has big claws, you can see on his hand here. He has very large, big, or in this case, it's not just a sentence, but it's like a clause on a contract. We've talked about like an act of God. Okay, I'm sorry, that was the other class. But like a clause in a contract would be like a section, a portion of a contract that would describe or define a certain term or situation or requirement for the contract. So it could be a contractual clause, like a section of a contract. All right. So there are lots of homonyms like this. Well, that's some new homonyms for you. So, short one question quiz. Santa blank brought awesome gifts this year. The jolly man with the bag full of gifts is a Claus, Claus, or Claus. Exact same pronunciation. The answer, of course, is Santa Claus, C-L-A-U-S. And if you're writing his name, Santa Claus, this should be a capital C, Santa Claus, just like this. Okay? All right. So back to English. If a clause does not express a complete thought, it is called a dependent clause. Dependent clause, which we will abbreviate with DC, and forms an incomplete sentence, or what we call a sentence fragment. Okay, dependent clause. What does that mean? If something is dependent, that means it cannot exist or survive or live or stand alone. It needs something else to support it, to give it life, to allow it to exist. Okay? So a dependent clause cannot exist by itself. Just like, how many of you are dependent on your parents for financial support, to help pay for tuition, for housing, for food, for transportation, for clothes? If you are financially dependent on them, then you are a dependent. In the US, that would mean they can claim you on their income taxes. You cannot file yourself, but they would file for you because you are financially dependent on them. And I just noticed this is notice how it has a red line under it? That's a signal that I've spelled it wrong. I ended up with an extra letter in there, financially dependent. Okay? So a dependent clause cannot exist by itself. If it cannot exist by itself, if it's a dependent clause, it's an incomplete sentence. Something's missing, it's incomplete. Or a sentence fragment. A fragment is a piece of something. It's not a whole. It's just a part of something. If you take a bottle, a glass bottle, and throw it on the ground, it will break into 1,000 little pieces. You will have glass fragments all over the place. Broken pieces. Fragments of glass. Okay? So this is a sentence fragment. It's a broken piece of a sentence. It's not whole. It's not complete. Let's look at a few examples here of sentence fragments. Because I skipped breakfast. Okay, does that have a subject? Yes, I. Does it have a verb? Skipped. Yes, I skipped. Does it express a complete thought? Because I skipped breakfast. What? What happened? So it's not a complete thought. So this is a dependent clause, an incomplete sentence, a sentence fragment. Though she studies it in school, what? Again, we have an incomplete thought. We have a subject and a verb, but not a complete thought. So it's a dependent clause, it's an incomplete sentence, it's a sentence fragment. And my shoes are wet. What? My shoes, subject, are, verb. Is it a complete thought? And my shoes are wet. The and tells us that something has to come before this. So something is missing here. That would be like saying, and 3 is 5. And 3 is 5. And my shoes are wet. This is the result. This is what happens. Okay? Is this a complete equation? No. Something is missing. Okay? Something needs to go in the blank. Just like here, something is missing at the beginning. Okay? Even though he gives me homework, what? Subject, verb, incomplete thought. Dependent clause, incomplete sentence, sentence fragment. Okay? So those are some examples of dependent clauses. Now, if a clause does express a complete thought, It is called an independent clause and forms a complete sentence. If it's independent, it can exist alone by itself. I am hungry. Subject, verb. Is that a complete thought? I am hungry? Yes, it's a complete thought. It makes sense by itself, so it's an independent clause. It's a complete sentence. Learning English is difficult. Subject, verb, complete thought, independent clause, complete sentence. It is raining today. Subject, verb, complete thought. It is raining today. Yes. Is it true? Is it raining today? No. Where I'm at? No. Yesterday it was. Today it is not. So, does that matter? No. It makes it false, but it's still, even as an untrue sentence, it still is a complete sentence. So it's still an independent clause. It's still a complete sentence, whether it's true or not. John is my favorite teacher. Subject, verb, complete thought. Yes. Is it true? It doesn't matter. Whether it's true or not is not important. It has a subject and a verb. It expresses a complete thought. So it is still an independent clause and a complete sentence, whether it's true or not. Now, you may have noticed that the independent and dependent clauses I gave you have a connection to each other. I am hungry because I skipped breakfast. Learning English is difficult, though she studies it in school. It is raining today, and my shoes are wet. John is my favorite teacher, even though he gives me homework. So these clauses there's a connection between them, but these are still dependent clauses. They're still sentence fragments, okay? So even though they're connected to these or related to them, they're still incorrect. So how do we fix it? Well, we can change the dependent clause into an independent clause so that we have an independent clause plus an independent clause. I am hungry. I skipped breakfast. Learning English is difficult. She studies it in school. So notice these now, I skipped breakfast. That's a complete thought now. She studies it in school. That's a complete thought. It is raining today. My shoes are wet. John is my favorite teacher. He gives me homework. These also, subject, verb, complete thought. Subject, verb, complete thought. So these now are independent clauses. We could also reverse those. We could say, I skipped breakfast. I am hungry. She studies it in school. Learning English is difficult. My shoes are wet. It is raining today. He gives me homework. John is my favorite teacher. These are independent clause plus independent clause. But remember, these are connected. They're related to each other. So we can also combine them. We can put the independent clause together with the dependent clause and make a complete sentence. Remember, the dependent clause cannot exist by itself, but we can combine it. We can pair it with an independent clause. I am hungry because I skipped breakfast. So we have our independent clause plus our dependent clause. This now is a complete sentence. Learning English is difficult, though she studies it in school. Learning English is difficult, that's our independent clause. Though she studies it in school, dependent clause. It is raining today, and my shoes are wet. It is raining today, independent clause, and my shoes are wet, dependent clause. Notice here we have that comma conjunction like we've looked at before to combine these. John is my favorite teacher because he gives me homework. Wait. Because? Probably not. Probably not because. But so that doesn't make sense. But perhaps, hopefully, John is my favorite teacher even though he gives me homework. That makes more sense. So again, we have independent clause plus dependent clause, and those work now as a sentence. Notice here, when we have an independent clause followed by a dependent clause, independent plus dependent, notice there's no comma here. Okay? Notice there's no comma here. So if we have independent plus a dependent clause, there's no comma. Now, what about here, though? What about here? It is raining today, and my shoes are wet by itself is a dependent clause. But notice, remember, and is a conjunction. Remember, fanboys? So this is a conjunction. If we look at the end part here, my shoes are wet, that is actually an independent clause. My shoes are wet. So actually what we've got is an independent clause, comma, conjunction, independent clause. Or a sentence, comma, conjunction, sentence. And you've seen that before. So we have an independent clause, comma, conjunction, independent clause. Okay? So let me take out that space, because the space comes here, then the conjunction, then the independent clause. Or we can reverse what we just did. Because I skipped breakfast, I am hungry. Now notice here, because I skipped breakfast, that's the dependent clause. I am hungry, independent. So when the dependent clause comes first, we need a comma. So if we have a dependent clause, then we need a comma before the independent clause. Let me just take out that plus there. Okay? So if we have a dependent clause first, we have to have this comma here. Though she studies it in school, learning English is difficult. Dependent clause, comma, independent clause. Just like this. And my shoes are wet. It is raining today. And my shoes are wet. Does that make sense? No, again, we cannot start with the and here. We cannot start with the conjunction, just like we can't do that here. Okay? So how do we fix this? Because this isn't going to work. We could say, my shoes are wet, and it is raining today. So we could say, my shoes are wet, comma, conjunction, it is raining today. That works, but it's not the best. Probably a better way to say that would be, my shoes are wet because it is raining today. So now, notice, we have independent clause. We've changed that, actually, into an independent clause. And now, because it is raining today, that is our dependent clause. So there's no comma. Even though he gives me homework, John is my favorite teacher. Even though he gives me homework, dependent clause, comma, independent clause. Okay? So the punctuation that you use here is very important, whether there's a comma or not. So pay attention to that. If you need to review this, please do. So we've looked at clauses, independent clauses and dependent clauses. What's a sentence? A sentence is a group of words with one or more clauses used to express one or more complete thoughts. And that is what makes it a sentence. It has to have a clause, which means that it has a subject and a verb, and it has to express a complete thought. That makes it an independent clause or a sentence. It must express a complete thought, at least one. Okay, it can express more. Some sentences express several thoughts. Every sentence is composed of at least one independent clause. Without an independent clause, you have a sentence fragment. Good writing will use a combination of 4 different sentence types. Okay, we look at 4 different sentence types: simple, compound, complex, and compound complex. So a simple sentence, simple. What's compound mean? Well, just like in chemistry class, you have chemical compounds. Here you have the 2 elements, hydrogen and oxygen, joined together. You have 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. Put those together and you have a compound called H2O, or water. So a compound sentence, you have 2 things stuck together. Then you have complex, sounds a little more complicated, and compound complex. That's where you have a compound and make it more complex, make it more complicated. Okay? So let's look at some examples of each of these. A simple sentence has only one independent clause. Only one. Very simple. It may have only one subject and one verb, or it could actually have a compound subject. Compound subject, 2 pieces to the subject, or a compound verb, 2 verbs. Okay? So let's look at some examples. 1 subject and 1 verb. The young girl danced. Girl danced. Subject, verb. Simple sentence. It could have 1 verb and a compound subject. The young girl and boy danced. Girl and boy, compound subject, 1 verb, danced. Or it could have 1 subject and a compound verb. The young girl danced and clapped her hands. 1 subject, compound verb, danced and clapped. Or it could have a compound subject and a compound verb. The young girl and boy danced and clapped their hands. Girl and boy, compound subject, danced and clapped, compound verb. These are all simple sentences. A compound sentence has 2 independent clauses. So basically it's 2 sentences that are joined together, because independent clauses are sentences. They are complete sentences. A compound sentence, you join those together to make a compound sentence. Sometimes we use connector words called conjunctions to join those independent clauses. And that's where we can look at Schoolhouse Rock again and the song Conjunction Junction. So just like we have done with other conjunction or other Schoolhouse Rock songs, let me go through the lyrics with you, and then you can listen to it. So I will say the line. You guys can repeat it. You can just play and pause the video, okay, as you need to, or you can read it along with me. So let me give you the lyrics here, and that is really small on my screen here, so let me get my glasses. I'll send you the file to this also. So it says conjunction junction. What's your function? What's your function means what's your job? What do you do? Hooking up words and phrases and clauses. Hooking up means to connect, to join together. Okay? This is not the same as hooking up when you go to a nightclub. Okay? That's very different. But hooking up words and phrases and clauses means to connect, to join. Just like you can hook up a computer, or you can hook up a printer to your computer. Okay? Conjunction junction, how's that function? How's that function? How does that work? How does it operate? I got 3 favorite cars that get most of my job done. Conjunction junction, what's their function? The function of these 3 words. I got and, but, and or. They'll get you pretty far. Pretty far, the word pretty here does not mean beautiful, but it means to a great degree. It means a lot. So if we say something is pretty good, well, that's pretty good. It means it's very good, it's really good. Okay? If we say, oh, this is pretty hard, it means it's really difficult. Okay? And that's an additive. Like here, we have an additive. You add something, it does addition. And that's an additive. Like this and that. But that's sort of the opposite. Not this, but that. So we take one away. And then there's or. O-R, when you have a choice. Like this or that. And, but, and or get you pretty far. Conjunction junction, what's your function? Hooking up 2 boxcars and making them run right. Boxcars, those are just like the square or the rectangular cars on a train with like the flat, straight sides. Looks like a box on wheels. That's a boxcar. Making them run right, making is a little contraction here for them. Making them run right. Milk and honey. Bread and butter. Kimchi and rice. Oh wait, not kimchi. Peas and rice. In America, especially in the South, to mix green peas, the little round peas, with white rice would be a common thing. Peas and rice. Hey, that's nice. Dirty but happy. Digging and scratching. Losing your shoe and a button or 2. He's poor but honest. Sad but true. Boo-hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo. Boo-hoo is the sound you make when you're crying. Boo-hoo-hoo-hoo. Especially a baby. Boo-hoo. It's a crying sound. Conjunction junction, what's your function? Hooking up 2 cars to 1. When you say something like this choice. Either now or later, or no choice. Neither now nor ever. Hey, that's clever. Eat this or that. Grow thin or fat. Never mind, I wouldn't do that. I'm fat enough now. Conjunction junction, what's your function? Hooking up phrases and clauses that balance. Like, out of the frying pan and into the fire. He cut loose the sandbags, but the balloon wouldn't go any higher. Let's go up to the mountains or down to the seas. You should always say thank you, or at least say please. Conjunction junction, what's your function? Hooking up words and phrases and clauses in complex sentences like, in the mornings when I'm usually wide awake, I love to take a walk through the gardens and down by the lake, where I often see a duck and a drake, and I wonder, as I walk by, just what they'd say if they could speak, although I know that's an absurd thought. What does absurd mean? Absurd means crazy, ridiculous. That's a crazy thought. That's absurd. That's impossible. That's absurd. Okay. It talks here about a duck and a drake. A drake would be the male duck. The male duck. Conjunction junction, what's your function? Hooking up cars and making them function. Conjunction junction, how's that function? I like tying up words and phrases and clauses. Tying up, tying them together. Conjunction junction, watch that function. I'm going to get you there if you're very careful. Conjunction junction, what's your function? I'm going to get you there if you're very careful. Conjunction junction, what's your function? I'm going to get you there if you're very careful. Okay, so to avoid any more copyright problems, I'm going to just send you the file for conjunction junction so you can listen to it. So you can stop or pause the lecture now. Pause the lecture. Not pause. Pause the lecture for a few minutes and listen to the conjunction junction video. And I will send you the lyrics, or you can follow the lyrics on the screen here so you can sing along with it. Okay, so remember that a conjunction is a word that connects words or groups of words. I enjoy rock, hip-hop, and jazz, but not classical music. And we looked at these quite a bit earlier in the semester when we were looking at the parts of speech. Just to remind you, we talked about coordinating conjunctions. The 7 ones here we call fanboys. That's for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. And remember, when you write them, when you use them in a sentence, you need to have a comma in front of them, okay? Each one needs a comma in front of it, just like we looked at here. An independent clause, comma, conjunction, independent clause, comma, conjunction, okay? So, comma, for, comma, and, comma, nor, comma, but, comma, or, comma, yet, comma, so. All right? You have a sentence, an independent clause, a comma, fanboys, a conjunction, and another sentence. We looked at some simple examples. Okay, I'm not going to go over these now because we've already talked about these. If you want more description, go back to the lecture from earlier in the semester. You can review these. And then we looked at some more complex examples, some more advanced sentences. Okay, so again, we looked at these already, so you can go back and review those if you need some additional practice or review on those. So, sometimes connector words called conjunctions are used. Those are for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. Fanboys. Let's look at examples with each of those. These are all about rain and umbrellas. I think when I created these slides, it must have been raining a lot. I hate carrying an umbrella, for I always leave it somewhere. I hate carrying an umbrella. Sentence. I always leave it somewhere. Sentence, comma, conjunction. So whenever we have two independent clauses joined together with a conjunction, we need a comma before the conjunction. What does the word for mean here? Basically means because. I hate carrying an umbrella because I always leave it somewhere. And I own several umbrellas, comma, and, comma, conjunction. I always keep one in the car and in the office. So, independent clause, comma, conjunction, independent clause. Nor. I do not like to wear a raincoat, nor do I like to get wet. I do not like to wear a raincoat, independent clause, comma, conjunction. Do I like to get wet? Wait, that sounds like a question. Is it? No, it's not a question. Remember, nor basically means not also. So, nor means and I do not like to get wet either. Okay, so when you use nor, it changes the entire sentence structure, nor do I like to get wet. So you're saying, I do not like to get wet. Okay, so nor is kind of a special case here. It's a little more difficult to use. It's not used that commonly nowadays, but you need to understand it. You should at least recognize what it means when you see it. Even if you never actually write it, you should understand it. Okay? But I own several umbrellas, but I never seem to have one when I need it. Sentence, comma, conjunction, sentence. Or, I usually leave my umbrella at home, or I leave it on the subway. Comma, conjunction, sentence, sentence. Yet, I do not like to carry an umbrella, comma, conjunction, yet it is great to have when it is raining. What does yet mean here? But, basically. I don't like to carry an umbrella, but it's great to have when it's raining. The weather forecast predicted rain, so I took my umbrella. Sentence, comma, conjunction, sentence. What does so mean in this case? Therefore, the weather forecast predicted rain, therefore, as a result, I took my umbrella. Okay? There are other compound sentences that use semicolons and transition words instead of fanboys, and we will look at some of those later on. Okay? A complex sentence, so we've looked at simple, compound, complex sentence, has only one independent clause and one or more dependent clauses. The independent clause and dependent clause are linked by subordinators, words like who, that, which, because, and although. I don't care if you know what this is, as long as you know how to use these. Okay? The salesman, who only works when it rains, makes a lot of money during the rainy season. Where is our independent clause? The salesman makes a lot of money during the rainy season. There's our sentence. Where's our dependent clause? Who only works when it rains? Who only works when it rains? Is that a question? No, not in this case. It's not who only works when it rains. It's not a question here. What it does is this phrase gives us more information about the salesman. The salesman makes a lot of money during the rainy season. We could completely remove this section. Notice there are commas before and after it. When there's a comma before and after, you could actually grab those commas and pull that out, because it's not vital. It doesn't change the meaning. But by saying who only works when it rains, it gives us more information about the salesman. It describes him. I lost the umbrella that I bought last week. I lost the umbrella, independent clause, that I bought last week. That describes the umbrella that is missing. I lost the umbrella, which one? The one that I bought last week. Okay. Which, my new umbrella, which has stripes on it, looks like a rainbow. Our independent clause, my new umbrella, looks like a rainbow. That's our independent clause. Which has stripes on it describes the umbrella. Notice again, there's a comma here and here. We could grab those commas, remove that part of the sentence. My new umbrella looks like a rainbow, and the meaning does not change. Because I did not have my new umbrella with me when it started raining, I bought a new one. Where is our independent clause? I bought a new one. That short section is the independent clause. Because I did not have my new umbrella with me when it started raining, does not express a complete thought. Therefore, it is a dependent clause. It is a sentence fragment. Remember, when we have a dependent clause at the beginning, followed by an independent clause, we have to have a comma here, just like this. Dependent clause, comma, independent clause. We could revise that sentence. We could put the independent clause first. I bought a new, here we can't really say a new one, so we want to change it a little bit. We want to start with what the item is. So we'd say, I bought a new umbrella because I did not have my new one. So now we've switched umbrella and one. Okay? Because I did not have my new one with me when it started raining. Notice if we put the independent clause first, then the dependent clause, independent and dependent, there is no comma between those. If you start with the dependent and then the independent, there is a comma. Although it was raining, I decided to walk to class. Although it was raining, dependent clause, comma, I decided to walk to class, independent clause. Okay? Okay, the next section here is about compound, complex sentences. I'm going to skip these for today. I'm just going to quickly flip through the slides here, and I will talk about these in our next class, because I want to get to the exercises here. And you don't need that section for this first part. So we have exercises 1, 2, and 3 here. We're going to look at the first section of exercises on the worksheet. There are 7 sentences, 7 examples. This is your homework assignment. Okay? So it says combine the following sentences using and, or, but, or so. So some of the fanboys, you don't need to use all of them here. Just and, or, but, or so to make compound sentences. So for example, number 1, there are many teachers working here. They come from several different countries. How do we combine these using and, or, but, or so? Remember, if we want to combine 2 independent clauses, we need an independent clause, comma, conjunction, independent clause. Okay? So there are many teachers working here, but they come from several different countries. Or they come from several different countries. So they come from several different countries. Or and they come from several different countries. Which one works best? And. There are many teachers working here, and they come from several different countries. So remember, you need a comma, conjunction, and then they started with a capital letter. Make sure you change that to a lowercase letter. So there's 3 things you need to do, or 4 things. You need to choose the correct conjunction, replace the period with a comma, add the conjunction, and then change the capital letter to a lowercase letter. Okay? All of those things are required to make this correct. Okay? And then the rest of those will be homework before our next class, and we will go through those at the beginning of our next lecture. Have a good day, and I'll see you in our next class.